Everyone, welcome. Thank you for your patience as we do a little housekeeping to ensure people are able to participate in different languages. So when someone is speaking in a language other than your own, please activate the Zoom interpretation by clicking on the interpretation globe in the lower right side of your screen and choose the language in which you would like to listen. If you're connecting to Zoom through your phone, please touch the three dots at the bottom right corner of your screen where it says More and choose Language Interpretation and choose the language in which you like to listen and then touch Done. And if the interpreters would please kindly give instructions now in Spanish. Thank you.
Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes. Este evento será presentado en ambos inglés y español. Para escuchar la interpretación al español, por favor seleccione el canal para español. Si usa una computadora, haga clic en el globito en la parte inferior de la pantalla donde dice Interpretation o Interpretación y luego seleccione Español. Si usa la aplicación de Zoom en su teléfono o tableta, haga clic en los tres puntitos, luego Interpretación de idiomas, luego Español y por último Finalizado. Gracias. Comuníquense en el chat si hay problemas con acceder a la interpretación. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. So welcome everyone to Uplifting Women Human Rights Defenders and Advancing the Escazú Agreement. And this event is hosted by Fundación Friedrich Ebert, Reacción Climática, We Can, SIDUR, OMER, Las Hacemos, Mujeres Amazónicas, Comunicación y Educación Ambiental, and Iniciativa de Acceso México. So we're really glad to have this incredible collaboration of many, many groups today, and we thank you all for joining us for this really important event. My name is Osprey Oriole Lake, and I am the founder and executive director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, or WECAN. And as we go along, please be welcome to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and where you're from, and we're really glad that you could be with us. This event is a formal side event of the Escazú Agreement second conference. Maybe we could get mute, thanks. This event is a formal side event of the Escazú Agreement's second conference of parties for the Latin American and Caribbean region, taking place right now in Argentina. And some of the presenters are in Argentina right now on the ground. And some of us are actually in New York City because this event is also being held parallel to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And we're really honored to be here with Indigenous women leaders at the UN right now and have been bringing up the issue of how important this Escazú Agreement is to Indigenous women in the LAC region. There is a growing trend in attacks and murders and intimidation against human rights and Indigenous land defenders worldwide. And Global Witness reports each year show an increase in violence towards land defenders as a result of their work to protect the land and water and expose the unjust practices that are threatening the health of their communities. Women and Indigenous women in particular face even greater challenges and dangers as they navigate the brutal intersection of environmental devastation, cultural dislocation, and sexual violence and gender-based persecution. So when Indigenous land and water protectors are murdered or criminalized, we all must really collectively speak out and take action. And it's also vital to highlight that 80% of the biodiversity left on Earth right now is in Indigenous lands and territories. And our Indigenous sisters and brothers are often putting their bodies on the line every day to protect their lands, forests, and waterways. And first and foremost, we should be supporting our relatives because they should not be facing the brutal violence as they fight to stop the destruction of their homelands and lifeways. But we need to recognize that this is all of our fight. We all need to be engaged. As many of you may know, Latin America is one of the deadliest regions in the world for land defenders, and attacks and criminalization of women protecting their territories and communities is very specific. So it's imperative to implement policies such as those included in the Escazú Agreement that ensure human and rights and land defense environmental defense, and access to environmental information is woven together. On November 5th, 2020, the Escazú Agreement, also known more formally as the Regional Agreement for the Access to Information, to Public Participation, and Access to Justice on Environmental Issues, was fully ratified. The agreement is a groundbreaking multilateral accord that can really help protect women land defenders who are, as I say, under attack to preserve the biodiverse ecosystems across Latin America and the Caribbean. So during this event, women environmental and human rights defenders, policymakers, and feminist advocates are going to be highlighting the challenges women in all of their diversity face in securing human and Indigenous rights, gaining access to information, and protecting land, territories, and communities, and the context of implications and opportunities women have as part of the Escazú Agreement. Grassroots regional and international organizations are here to share their calls to action for ensuring women and human rights and the protection of biodiverse regions in the LAC region are advancing, and that there is a proper implementation of this Escazú Agreement, because we all know you can have policies, but that doesn't mean they're being implemented in a way that really supports grassroots leaders. And that's what we really want to get into today. And in the chat, I'm going to have Catherine put a link to WeCan't's work around this agreement and some of the research we've done and work we're doing campaigning for the proper implementation of the Escazú Agreement and to support our allies and partners on the ground. And with that, I'm now going to pass the floor to Mariana Blanco, and she will introduce herself and her organization and share some of her framing remarks, and then we're going to be hearing from the panelists. Maria, thank you so much. I hand the floor to you. You're on mute.
Hola. Hola, bienvenidas a todas, todos, todes. Muchísimas gracias, Osprey, por esta introducción. Mi nombre es Mariana Blanco.
Hi, welcome everyone. Osprey, thank you so much for that presentation. My name is Mariana Blanco. I coordinate the Social Transformation Project, the Frederick Geber Foundation. It is wonderful to be here today with all of these women doing advocacy and defending the territories. It is really wonderful to share here with everyone who is here in person. Actually, we are in Buenos Aires, and the second conference is taking place, and several of the people that are part of this parallel event, we are here in person. So we will be passing the mic around over here. So welcome. For me, just talking a little bit more about the work that we have been doing from the foundation in terms of the Escazú Agreement. And 3 years it's been since we have been organizing several workshops at a regional level, especially for the dissemination of information of what is the Escazú Agreement with the different political, social, women advocates, young actors, right? And throughout these years, we have realized that precisely one of the lines that we need to urgently strengthen, because the agreement as it is actually the lens of gender, right? That focus, so we can actually apply in all of the rights that are delineated in the Escazú Agreement, that women are able to access those rights adequately. So we also know that the conditions in which many women in the Latin American region we live, those are situations of inequality. We have a lesser access to, well, topics of, technology, participation, being able to access information. Women also live under critical economic conditions. There's really a lot of these things does not allow women to access information, public participation, and access to equity and justice, right? Which is the three pillars that we should be paying attention to from the Escazú Agreement. So in this way, we have been holding several workshops at a regional level, also workshops in Mexico, not only different topics, but more specifically the topic related to gender. So in one thing to know are the gaps that do not allow women to access the rights that are in the Escazú Agreement. We have found that much of this keeps is repeated, right? All the inequality and all these barriers that exist in our countries, and they do not allow women to reach and exercise their rights. So we're going to be sharing the results of these workshops. And well, it is really wonderful to invite people we have worked before in terms or in the topics of gender related to the Escazú Agreement. So welcome. And I also want to invite you all to see the work that we have been doing, and also let's keep holding these parallel events and the other conferences that are taking place at the moment. Osprey?
Thank you so much for your comments. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us from on the ground. It's really exciting that you're there. And I would now like to hand the floor to Olympia Castillo. Please go ahead, Olympia, and thank you so much for being with us. Olympia, you're on mute.
I believe that the folks.
Ya, ¿verdad? ¿Ya me escuchan?
Okay, here we are. Yep.
Sí. No, es que aquí, como estamos haciendo este evento de manera híbrido,
Since we are holding this event hybrid, but to facilitate the transmission, we are going to actually switch, and we're going to pass the mic around to prioritize the online or the virtual participants. So this is not a small feat, right? To be at the second conference, we are talking about what a long journey has implied for a lot of organizations. A lot of us have been working on this since 2001 that we started this history, right? We are very happy of all the things that we have been achieving in the process of preparation and the process of negotiation that was being built step by step through the significant participation of the public, right? And we managed 5 years ago to create this linking instrument, but totally, we prioritizing having this instrument. There were a lot of things that were left behind. So now we are in this moment of how and what are we going to do so the rights of women for access are guaranteed in the Escazú Agreement. It is not about waiting for some years might be implemented, it might be enforced, or some things might be added or ratified, but we want to build implementation and enforcement, incorporated women's rights. And we have really good rights and examples, I'm sorry, from other treaties and other conventions that they actually have action plans, and that is what we want. So we want that this extremely important work that we have been doing to parallel with a lot of organizations, a lot of women in Mexico, and now we decided to do a regional event, a regional meeting, because at the end of the day, we share a lot of You know, we lack access to information. How do we do that? We have technological limitants, all these differences that we have, that women are not able to access education, also participation and engagement. Well, I think that we are able to mention so many examples that women, just for the fact that they're women, they are being denied the access of engagement and participation. They do not have the opportunity. They do not have the political representation. They do not have their deeds. And I think that also happens in Mexico, other countries, the same in Mexico. You inherit those deeds, right, from the father to the son. They never pass through the wife or through the daughters. And that really limits representation, that really limits the access to justice. And that brings us then that the strengthening of the abilities that are on Article 10 should also emphasize more specifically that in which context are these women living, and what abilities should be strengthened.
And we're talking about a very big context: rural women, urban women, women who don't have land titles. And it's really nice to see so many young women here who are interested in this, because knowledge and the use of technology can be a real barrier. And so, this broad context, if women are the main managers of natural resources, you are the ones who have many family activities under your responsibility, and so they need to hear your voices. They need to take into account your needs and your limitations. And that's why we are hoping that we can continue and make this a historic conference for what we can do in terms of a gender action plan for women in the Escazú Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olympia, for your important comments. And now we're going to be handing the floor to Honorable Senator of Bolivia, Cecilia Requena. We welcome you and thank you so much for being with us. Do we have the senator? Here she is. You need to unmute yourself. Thank you. If you could unmute.
Ahora sí, buenas tardes a todas las personas que nos
All
están
right. Good afternoon to everyone who is listening online and who's here in Buenos Aires, where we have a COP2 meeting for the Escazú Agreement. And I wanted to send my warm greetings to you all. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here at this table today. This is the first time that I have attended a conference of the parties to the Escazú Agreement. And this is such an important instrument. I want to start there. The Escazú Agreement is giving countries with problems such as Bolivia, it's giving us access to information, access to justice, access to participation, and particularly for women, it's an alternative to some of our national problems that we are facing. Because this way we can connect with folks in other countries, our comrades, our colleagues who are seated here, who are working on court cases. This is indispensable work. Escazú allows us to learn from other countries that are very different from ours. And being part of the Escazú Agreement means that we can all start on this path of sharing and boosting our understanding together. And for many cases, this is all we have. The international forums. And in these situations, well, all of the mechanisms or some of the preventative mechanisms, for example, in the legislative realm, are not working to truly change the situation, and particularly in our territories, in rural territories, but also as well in cities. We see this problem in cities too. The Escazú Agreement is essential to reinforce and provide a common international platform to make complaints, to make demands for participation and access to justice and information, and to protect environmental and human rights defenders. And this is what I wanted to put on the table to begin. This network of solidarity, and solidarity is really the right word, under the agreement is so important. And I'd like to say that in Bolivia, 2/3 of environmental and human rights defenders are women, and many times they are women in environmental areas with really difficult conditions. Terequia is one working on, it's a protected area working against hydrocarbons. Madidi is another one where they're fighting against gold. And there is a third indigenous territory where they are working against mining and also monocultures. And there are so many difficulties in these places, just as Olympia has described. The message I want to give is that the network here is essential. We need a broader network for joint work and solidarity and international solidarity so that we can do this work. And I'd like to share two basic ideas. The first one is that we are facing a situation that is derived from state policies that for me are part of a global system, of course, but also national policies that are oriented toward extractivism. And this is a problem of vision as well as options. I'd like to emphasize that because it's important to demand that our national authorities make different decisions going forward. And to allow us to be competitive, they can do something. They like to blame other external actors and then make these devastating decisions domestically when there really are alternatives that exist. It's important to say and notice that sustainable development or buen vivir or living well is possible. Respect for nature, to say it that way, is a basic condition for there to be a viable quality of life in the future. And that's where we should be looking for new opportunities to improve the quality of our lives. I'd like to say that I fully commit to this cause of creating a gender action plan. This is essential. And we know that it's mainly women who are in this struggle. Many times it is women in great states of vulnerability, but also very powerful women. There's a lot of power among women in these networks. We hope we can do what is needed so that the 21st century is not a catastrophe, but instead we will continue to work and live within the potentials and the limits that nature places on us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your really important comments and also pointing out the also broad context of the extractive economy that is also driving a lot of these issues. And I think that's very important that we also address that issue equally to also the Escazú Agreement as well. So thank you for that. And I will now hand the floor to Patricia Galinga from Ecuador. She's a spokeswoman for Mujeres Amazónica Defensora de la Selva. You have the floor, Patricia.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon. To me, it's a real pleasure to be back here in this event and speaking with you women here in person and online. And we ratified the Escazú Agreement 2 or more years ago. And many states are having difficulty implementing it. But the fact is, we see that the inequities that we've been fighting against continue. We've got harassment, we've got lack of access to information, and the extractive industries are still affecting our territories and particularly women. And there's total impunity when there are cases brought in favor of defenders, and there is no justice, no environmental justice, and many environmental defenders and human rights defenders too, land defenders, like the collective of Amazonian women, women from the communities, we feel that we have completely a lack of defense, of protections. There's no commitment to look out for the security of people who are defending rights and defending the environment. It's a weak state. It's a very weak government we have here that does not respond to the requirements. And there is a situation of criminality going on. We are on the defense because if we continue to struggle against legal or illegal mining, we face grave repercussions. We face threats and harassment, those of us who are working to protect human rights. And in terms of gender, as civil society, as Amazonian women, what we have done is try to train and empower women so that they can reassert their rights to their territories and get access to justice and generate processes that are that provide access to justice within the nation state. That's the reality of our country, Ecuador. We're continuing to fight for our rights because everything that has to do with extractivism affects rights, both the rights of women and the rights of indigenous peoples. There is no consultation, there's no participation in any of the processes that they are carrying out in these communities. We see that the oil frontier is expanding and expanding. We see that the state is weak. And all of these processes in Ecuador are going to the courts. There are denunciations, there are complaints. This is all coming from the civil society here in Ecuador. And we need politicians and elected officials to comply with the Escazú Agreement. This is the agreement that we've always been, this is the reality that we've all been experiencing. The Escazú Agreement allows us to continue demanding that our rights be respected. And the governments need to know that these agreements should be respected. They must be respected within their territories. We're going to keep working to make sure that there are more women spokespeople, women spokespersons who are land defenders and life defenders. And if this causes them to be threatened and harassed, I think that this means that the Escazú Agreement is an important source of support for us in Ecuador and internationally, and that's valid. This is what I can share from Ecuador, from the women here and the territories. The Escazú Agreement is useful in our context, and I'll repeat again that the attitude of governments is not in alignment with compliance with this agreement and the advancement of rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia Galinga, for your really important comments and, also reflecting on how important it is that we really push governments to implement and respect the Escazú Agreement. As you said, it's only powerful in as much as it actually is working on the ground. So thank you for that. And now, please welcome Beatriz Oliveira. You have the floor. Thank you.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Muchas gracias. Espero estén teniendo una buena jornada. Yo solamente voy a...
Hello, thank you very much. I hope you're having a good day. I'm going to share a few slides. I think that the colleagues who have already spoken were very clear in their presentations. And for us, well, let me introduce myself. I am Beatriz Oliveira. Engenera is the name of my organization. We are part of the Cambiamos la Ya coalition in Mexico against fracking. We're fighting to avoid the practice of fracking in our country. We have different barriers in terms of the advancement of the Escazú Agreement. And what we have seen in our work with our comrades is that the inequitable distribution of domestic and care work is an important barrier that is impeding effective participation and access to information for women. We see this in rural places as well as urban places. And we also think it's really important to advance with a platform of action so that we can push at this COP and show the importance of making gains in this area. We also see that there's a problem of access to education. Many times the right to education is restricted for women in our country, like in other places of Latin America. And also there's a lack of economic autonomy, a lack of participation by women in economic spheres. We see a lack of guarantee for the right to a life free from violence and high levels of impunity, as Patricia said. And there are very high rates of impunity in Latin America. And there's a digital divide that we have with regard to the gap between rural and urban places. And there's a lack of adequate access to information and to justice. And I'd like to echo what Patricia said a moment ago. The predominant development model is a neo-extractivist model, and it's deeply unequal. Perhaps it's not a model like the one we saw 500 years ago during the colonial era. It's not as flagrant as all of that, but now it's a little more disguised. They favor land grabbing. They favor corporations and their access to land and water, etc.
De desarrollo predominante es una de las principales barreras y también hay que decirlo, hay que señalarlo en nuestros planes de acción, en nuestras discusiones y que justamente el acuerdo de Escazú es una herramienta para poder luchar efectivamente.
And this is a tool to be able to fight against this model. And finally, just only mentioning that what we understand by the defense of the territories is a very broad and big labor that and you know what we see in Mexico is that we are advancing towards a feminization of a territory defense. We see militarized areas from which resources are being extracted. We also see this process of feminization, and we need to emphasize that women, even if they don't have land, they sometimes don't have economic autonomy. They are there, they are on the streets and mobilizing, and they are participating, and they are defending their territories. And these pictures, I wanted to show them to you because these are compañeras, these are colleagues we have worked with from the Huasteca Potosina, the northern part of Mexico, and they are defending their territory from fracking. And I think that is it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Beatriz, for that really important presentation. And I'm going to hand the floor now to Sylvia Lipa. And we also got a message from the interpreters. I always have to remind myself as well to speak slowly since there's interpretation. Thank you so much. I know I can talk fast too, so just a friendly reminder. You have the floor, Sylvia Lipa. Thank you.
Sí, hola, hola. Sí,
Hi.
un saludo cordial a todos las que nos están escuchando.
Greetings, everyone who are listening, folks in Buenos Aires, also people connecting from different parts of our planet. My name is Silvia Lipa. I am an Indigenous leader, and I speak from Bolivia. And greetings also to the Honorable Requena, and she said a lot of truths about what happens in our country. clearly our territory, my territory is being affected by the mining industry. So we have been fighting and we have been surviving a mining. And with this, there's a lot of limitations, and the fact that we are indigenous that we are not allowed to inhabit a lot of spaces or inhabit spaces because men are inhabiting those. And when an indigenous a woman says something and she tries to reclaim these spaces, they, think that we are taking that away from them. We are taking the space away from the male indigenous leaders, and that is not true. Then I will always say we are fighting a double struggle. We fight and we struggle in our own region and territory, and also to be able to this space. We need to be visualized. We have been working in a rebuilding of what our territories are that are filled with the mining industry, and also just showing our faces and saying that we can rebuild in terms of a community rebuild. And we have been doing this either with support with the government or also support for some nonprofits that are helping us, and seeing the initiatives that we are holding as women in terms of the Escazú Agreement. As it's been said, I do agree. And the people who have been raising their voices are defended about the topic of taking care of the environment or forest. And it just seems that people don't care about it. It seems that we are just saying things to the void, but there are groups and organizations supporting us, and also thanking the invitation to this panel. And from this point, from this place in Bolivia, we will keep fighting, and we will be in the struggle, and we will have our territory. We will fight for enforcement, and our territories are, we will do the opposite. We will show that it is not what the governmental agencies, that's what's happened, right? We are able to show that there is an alternative way of working, of having, development in our territories, not the development that is being imposed, that extractivist and chauvinist, very patriarchal development. And I just wanted to say that to all of women who are here with us and seeing us in different countries. We are fighting day by day. And I always say that us Indigenous women in the territory, we live through the struggle every day. We feel and we know that after the news is over, after the topic of many conferences, we are still surviving, and we should resist. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, for your really important comments and perspectives. Really good to hear. And I will now hand the floor to Cata Alonso. Cata, you have the floor.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Muchas gracias por
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation and for being here with all of you. So first of all, I am very happy because it was ratified, and that was the hope that we had and the promise when it was still not ratified. So is with that, we are very thankful, and we hope that this agreement, we will have equity, gender equity. That's very important. I come from Chile, from one of the most significant areas. You might think, what is a zona de sacrificio? It is a place where water and air they're all polluted. We used to live from agriculture and fishing and a little bit of cattle for consumption. We had a really high quality of life. Now we don't have anything. The 4 miles of radius from Quintero Mochuncabique, we have 20 incredibly dangerous dams, and they're all polluted. There is also a refinery, also, and all of the international oiling industries are there. We also have chemical industries like Oxychemin. It has been the results are terrible because it didn't just destroy the soil. We no longer have food autonomy. That's just so important for the communities, but the health repercussions in our people has just been devastating. 1 of every 4 children are born with different congenital malformations and also genetic issues and also learning disabilities, and the special ed schools are to capacity. So what we need is to change this model that has been extremely negative for us. And this was an experiment the dictatorship did with a liberal extractivist model. And we trust that we will be able to advance with this Escazú Agreement to have economic justice, to have information, because every time that we wait, everything is already. And so we need for all of this to change, to have gender equity and access to justice, and also for us to all the people that we devote our lives to this. This is very important. So thank you so much, and thank you all of us for allowing us to be here today.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your comments. And now I'm going to hand the floor to Amelia Araguin. Please go ahead, Amelia.
Hola, buen día a todas, todos.
Hi, good day, everyone. Yeah, Amelia Arreguin,
Y también coordinadora del grupo de mujeres del convenio.
and also coordinator of the biodiversity convening. And it is this context that I'm going to share some of the learnings and some of the achievements that we've had in the convening of biodiversity, so that really serves as an example, or perhaps serves as strategic planning and ideas for the processes of Escazú from the biodiversity convening that's international, where most of actually the world, except for the US, we all share it. And it has as objective to preserve biodiversity and to promote sustainability since 1992. That is signed and ratified. There is an acknowledgement that's very explicit to the role that women have in this, particularly in biodiversity management. And given that these are very the topics of affinity that Escazú deals with it, there's several advancements that have been done in the biodiversity arena that could also inform what we're talking about today, which is developing in terms of gender, that it should be effectively enforced. In terms of the treaty, last December, the 3rd Gender Action Plan and Biodiversity was approved, and that should be applied till 2030. And it also brings very specific elements that are connected to the Escazú Agreement, because many of the women that do work at the CBD, we are also involved in the Escazú the processes, because there are several topics that go hand by hand, because conservation and also justice and access to acknowledging and the gender action plan, that's been an accepted document, and it is a document that the countries that are part of Escazú approved it, because they are part of the biodiversity treaty, and they have all these obligations that could be reclaimed in the context of the regional accord or agreement. And in terms of form and processes, we have some more of the learnings that would be very important to reclaim, and one of them has to do with, and it was a collective building among all the women's groups and human rights organizations, but also with countries that have this feminist perspective, and that also have sensibilities and political commitments with gender justice. And these processes is very important for all these instruments to be nurtured from the perspective of the different actors, so they are able to be implemented. Also, some of the other learnings that we have been grappling with is, it is really good to have this document. It is really great to have an official decision made that it is promoting the enforcement and to invite the countries, yes, but also something that we do not have at CBD that would be really great to have achieve in the context of Escazú is for that official decision to have a gender part of it, right? For it not to be just a parallel document of support to the official plans, but to have it enforced and to be mandated. And in that we wanna the learnings, and one of the gaps that we have in the context of the biodiversity topic is that we don't have a defined budget at a national regional level to enforce this gender action plan. So it's not about just holding the document with a very strong content that yes, it is needed, but we should also have the institutional conditions and all the guidelines for it to be enforced, because it usually ends at the same as other policies that yes we have, but they're not becoming reality. And the other learning that we have had, it has to do with the developing of the capacity in different ways, right? Institutional for the countries to have a trained personnel, that it is within their institutions, but also among us as women organizations, and also people doing defense work, for us to have the ability or to have those spaces to establish mechanisms to be directly involved in this process. I would not like to keep the talking, but I just want to leave the door open, and that invitation for you to go over the gender action plan, that it is an instrument, it is a document, and there are some guidelines there that touch upon the Escazú Agreement, the points, and I think that it could be very useful to bring from that gender action plan to the Escazú gender action plan those topics, particularly just to mention a couple. The objective one that it is increasing the rights to land ownership and natural resources and water for all women and girls. In objective 1.5, that it is to prevent all of the discrimination and gender-based violence, particularly in relationship to control property and access to resources. And topic 3.3 that talks about public participation in organizations and other women's networks and girls and topics of biodiversity. And there have been some decisions that have been taken by the countries involved with Escazú that were also would need to be enforced to both plans when this exists. So I also wanted to share the chat that I will leave the link to the official document so you can all access that. And from the CBD Women's Group, we are also here to accompany you and to be part of the processes of a discussion for the Escazú Agreement. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amelia, for your comments and for sharing all that information. It's really useful as we look at the two different processes and how they can support one another. So thank you for your comments. And I'd now like to give Carmen Capriles the floor. Thank you, Carmen.
Hola. Bueno, muchas gracias.
Hello. Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank those of you who are here in person, because this is a topic where we didn't expect to have such a great turnout in the room. It's really exciting to see you all. And so I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that we have as a feminist movement in support of the implementation of the Escazú Agreement. And in that sense, we have to take into account many different factors. First of all, the issue of all of the challenges that we have as women in Latin America, both in urban environments and in rural environments. To begin a joint struggle, we need to really unite. And this is one of the first issues that we have to take into account is time. These struggles take a lot of time. I'm here with Olympia, and since 2003, we've been working, pushing. We achieved the Escazú Agreement, and now we're working to enforce it, to make sure that it's implemented. But this is 20 years of work, almost constant work to achieve it. At a personal level, my family received a sentence from the Inter-American Human Rights Court about my uncle, my mother's brother, who was disappeared during the dictatorships in the 80s in Bolivia. That was a 43-year struggle by my family. Practically 2 generations had to work on that, getting justice in that case. And that was forced disappearance. Those are the things that push me to continue working, to be here in these struggles, so that Latin America won't see other families that have to work for 40 years to get a judgment in cases of forced disappearance, in cases where family members are killed, whether it's for environmental defense issues or human rights issues or any other kind of issue. This is something that happens in our region. They disappear you, they kill you, because the lives of Latin Americans at the global level aren't worth anything. And that's something that has been the case since the colonial era. That is something that we have to change. The lives of Latin Americans they deserve dignity. They deserve respect. They deserve to exist. And this anti-colonial struggle, we have to understand, you've heard my colleagues in Bolivia talk about gold. They took 50 tons of gold out of Bolivia during the colonial period. We didn't count as a country at that point. We were a colony. And 51 tons of gold. In the year 2022, 52 tons of gold. And this year, we expect that almost 60 tons of gold are going to be extracted from Bolivia. And these are just the official figures from the government. We don't know about the unofficial mining. And we've got mercury contaminating our rivers and contaminating our indigenous communities, contaminating our protected areas and our biodiversity. This is in our zone of sacrifice. And this is just to continue a model that doesn't benefit us, where just a few get rich and the others are forgotten. Right now, we're on this border. We're at this moment where we can do something for communities. Because Minamata disease is something that they all might end up facing really soon. This is something that affects your nervous system. You can't move when you have this. And this is the risk that these indigenous peoples are facing in our country. And that's why we think that the Escazú Agreement has to have that. It was born basically in the spirit of protecting environmental defenders. And it's in the image of Berta Cáceres and her struggle. And now there's so many other struggles that have ended people's lives and that are still ongoing right now. And we have to really make sure we're supporting this principle of solidarity. In that sense, there has to be a way to work against all these challenges. For example, we want Silvia to come. She's here telling us in person about her struggle. We want that. We want Silvia to be able to come and tell us in person about what's going on, what the Escazú Agreement has to do with her situation. And it's very hard to get funds for this. It's very hard to get the support of NGOs and institutions so that they can back these types of initiatives by women in the territories. Many times they don't even know where these territories are. And that's why it's so important to make these struggles visible. And that also is a way that the Escazú Agreement can help us. These COPs, these conferences of the parties of the Escazú Agreement, these can help us make struggles visible. These are real struggles. To conclude, it's important to take into account that these issues must be taken into account. All of the advantages and the challenges that Latin American women must face today. We must take those into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carmen, and thank all of the presenters. I want to make sure everyone who wanted to speak had a chance to. It's really important to hear from all of you, and I'm glad that there's a good turnout in the room and that we've been able to have this hybrid event. I think that's really important because, as you all have been saying, we need to make the situation much more visible and to bring forward this issue to a global community so we can get the support needed for proper implementation of the Escazú Agreement, and also from a gender lens, which we are all speaking from because of the particular issue of unequal gender norms and how that is impacting women land defenders specifically, and how we need to really address that issue. And I also wanted to mention a tool that Catherine will put in the link, which is that last year we worked closely with the attorneys at the Vance Center and went country by country, not all Latin American countries, but 8 of them, and had attorneys clearly look at state law and the Escazú Agreement so that we could get even more specific about the application of the Escazú Agreement country by country. And we have that in English and Portuguese and Spanish. And so we'll just offer that in the chat as a tool. I think that's one of the wonderful things about working collectively, is that we can share information and support each other and all hold up different pieces of this to put forward as much effort as we can to the success of the Escazú Agreement. And yes, as Carmen said, in the spirit of the land defenders and remembering people's lives are at stake all the time, and that we do not forget the defenders, and that we're here really for those frontline communities and doing everything we can. to stand with our sisters in struggle. I would like to now hand the floor to Mariana, who is going to lead us in a question and answer period and leading us through the last part of our discussion. I see we have a young participant. One of our youth has joined us. Maybe they have some kisses, it looks like, welcoming us with our future generations, which is one of the biggest reasons we're doing this. So I'm really glad that your young one could join us. With that, I'm going to hand the floor to Mariana. And I just wanted to mention that some of us are in New York on the ground, participating, as I mentioned, in the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And we might need to leave before the end of the session. And I mean, no disrespect. So I just wanted to let people know if some of us disappear, we're having to run to other events. And this one will continue until Mariana closes it as the co-host. Please go ahead, Mariana, you have the floor. And thank you all so much.
Thank you, Osprey. Thank you so much to all the speakers. We've got 20 minutes for questions. If anyone in the room has any questions or comments to make, and also in the Zoom room, if there are any questions, please go ahead. Yes? Yeah, but for here first, so that the people who are watching us can see. Okay, come on over. Yes. Oh, I really thank my colleague here for inviting me to speak, and also for sharing information from Argentina. We've got lots of work being done on women's rights and environmental issues with the participation of women. We've been part of the push for the Escazú Agreement and a gender action plan. My name is Maria José Lubardino. Part of the Defensa del Ambiente Buen Vivir, we are working with Indigenous women who are in territorial struggles against extractivism and all of the conflicts that we have going on around Argentina. And we have been promoting this network since 2017, and we have pushed for an ecofeminist network in Latin America and the Caribbean since 2018. And we met in Uruguay in the feminist gathering in Latin America. And we would like to connect with what you are all proposing in terms of these different initiatives in different places. We've been interacting with some different women comrades who are following up on the gender action plan and the biodiversity work. And I would really like to be involved in this plan. We are working to get countries to sign or ratify the Escazú Agreement, those that haven't done so already. And we've been talking to the minister from Brazil, and Brazil could potentially send to its Congress a request for ratification. And so I wanted to see if we could set a date from this panel or create a working group or something concrete so that we can work on the plan. Thanks, that's it.
Thank you so much. I don't know if on the chat or here, if we have questions. I think there's a question in the chat. Yeah, so I see here in the chat There are some organizations. Are there any organizations representing African peoples racialized as Black people in the communities where these presenters live and work?
En las comunidades en las que viven quienes hablaron anteriormente aquí en el evento. Marin Coleman, bueno, sí, dice Marin Coleman de la Unión
Marin
Asociación y Desarrollo.
Coleman.
Bueno, de la UE. Sí. No sé si hay otra pregunta más.
I don't know if we have other questions.
Sí, no, creo que podemos, si alguna de las ponentes quiere contestar.
I think if one of the presenters wants to answer that question. Yes, but you have to come here.
Tenemos otro comentario aquí.
Está medio incómodo, pero así se está teniendo buena recepción. Sí. Hola, hola a todas, hola a todos. Me llamo Alisa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elisa. I am on the Shara.
Bien, hace mucho trabajo con la litigación climática de casas climáticas en Brasil. Y bien, a mí me gustaría preguntar a vosotras cómo ven que el acuerdo.
And I would like to ask how the Escazú Agreement can contribute to creating support networks among women.
América Latina y Caribe. Y también algo que me preocupa muchísimo.
And something that really worries me, that concerns me, as the green market and how
Territorios tradicionales y sé que su impacto se da de una forma, se da más fuerte sobre mujeres.
if it's stronger in women. So I would like to hear a little bit more about. It's a little hard to understand her.
Muchas gracias.
Si hubiera algún otro comentario. Sí, adelante, bienvenidas. Qué gusto. Muy buenos días, mi nombre es María Gracia Campos, representante joven en la Comisión Nacional de Cambio Climático en Perú y también de una organización climáticas. Quería, en primer lugar,
And first of all, I wanted to thank you all for this space and for all the work that has been done around the Escazú Agreement. My question is, how can we, from the process of enforcement, to keep in mind the perspective of the gender lens in terms of Peru as a signing country, the movement of women, and how can we articulate with you all, because that what would lead us to finally ratify it. Thank you so much. And I think we have another question in the chat.
Bueno, por parte de Francisca,
Well, from Francisco says, thank you so much for the space. I think that the greatest challenge is to guarantee enforcement of the agreement. So in this way, how can we counterbalance the narratives and the power that the conservative groups have to stop the advancement if you have good practices or examples? And I think that that is also, now we can go to the responses, the answers. So the logistics here, the audio has been a little bit complex because you could either listen at the Zoom or in the place. So this combination. So we are just starting. The Escazú Agreement has been adopted since 5 years ago. So this work that we are doing, yes, we since 2020, at least in collaboration with this, we to
los derechos de las mujeres, pero estamos apenas, Carmen ya lo dijo,
And
esto
Carmen just said this takes a lot of time.
saben, a la cocina ustedes
And
recetas de
those of
cocina
you who cook, you know that, you know, a good recipe takes a long time, and you need to select and cook and do a lot of things. And this is going to be a wonderful dish, but we need to be slow in the process of cooking. And that's what we're doing. We want to build networks. And that's why it was very important that in the framework of the second conference, we were we had this event when we had this proposal for the parallel events. There were so many more events than, yeah. So right now,
pero se dan cuenta qué fortuito fue porque entonces pudimos tener este enfoque de las mujeres como lo que somos mujeres, pero el énfasis de las mujeres
but
porque hay un trecho muy grande entre yo que puedo hablar de decir, a ver, las mujeres
and
todas las mujeres,
so, you know, women,
una
how
computadora,
can
pueden usar el internet,
women access technology that is different to these struggles that women are, the women doing defense work doing on the field. There's a big difference, but women are always present. And the Belize, the compañera was saying, it's all of us and not neither of us. And we are just building the space, and we want to build these networks. And we can't say, oh no, this it's me and her, and you know, we are just showing what we want to do. And I mean, the priorities, and to make sure that we all bring something to all. Juanita, for example, who comes from Ecuador, the workshop that we had the other day, she was telling us, and you know, if you see her T-shirt of Black women, and I didn't know that why, because they are manifesting some specific need as a group and as a section and as organizations and young women, right? That's it's a topic that's starting to make more noise. You know, these young women that have a lot of potential, that have so many advantages that our predecessors had, from the right to education. You know how many women from past generations didn't even go to school.
Ni siquiera fueron a la escuela o ya saben leer y escribir, con eso es más que suficiente. Hoy, ¿cuántas chicas
So today, how many young girls have the chance, the opportunity to go to university, but they keep facing other the challenges of environmental decay. So we have to set all of those things in this larger context, right? To bring all of the ingredients, and we are just building. We are not there yet, but we are getting together, we are gathering. So everyone is able to bring our own ability and our interests. The topic of how to face all these big projects that are in the opposition, that is also the other a task that we have in terms of Peru, where the business sector has been the one who's opposing the ratification of the agreement. And there are countries, for example, where there was and that it is, like we said at the beginning, it is there where our work started, you know, making sure the agreement was known, how it's going to work, and to know how the agreement is going to serve my cause and my struggle and my work. Thank you.
posteriormente le damos la palabra si alguien de Zoom quiere también contestar.
Gracias.
Thank you. I wanted to make a couple of comments, and I'll be very brief. The first thing I wanted to say is that many times when people ask how they can help, the issue of the network is important, I think. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is that we need alliances at multiple levels and among multiple types of actors. We need the state, we need legislators to be involved. Connecting with civil society, connecting with the executive as much as possible. We really have to be very broad in our vision. And I'm here because I understand the importance of it. And then at the national level, also the international level has a very important role. We have to really think about the importance of solidarity and filing complaints at the international level about contamination in all of the territories that have been mentioned. This is something that we have to learn to do better. At the same time, I understand these networks are complex. I think never. We should never lose our connection to specific on-the-ground struggles. We always have to refer to the territories, whether they're rural or urban. That's going to help us to move forward and make progress. A second thing is that I would like to take away the sense of urgency, or I would like to add a sense of urgency, because we know we have few years to work to tackle the climate crisis. These are critical years. And so let's learn from all that has been accumulated over so many years to hasten these processes as much as possible. There isn't time to delay, and the changes have to be substantial. And as you have said, this is a civilization-wide change that we need. We have to be clear that these aren't just tiny adjustments, right? This is a civilizational level change. And so we need concrete steps. Maybe we can't do everything all at once, but we need to make progress. And we need to further our pragmatism, our tolerance. We don't want to lose our perspective. It isn't easy. I know it isn't, but I think that walking forward and trying to understand, that's the way. That was my second point. And my third point is I'm also quite concerned. And this is something that was said yesterday at one of the tables. I wanted to reiterate it. The illegality around extractivism. For example, we have gold exploitation, but that's very connected with, and I'm almost finishing up, connected with drug trafficking and human trafficking in my country, and the arms trade, the illegal arms trade. And this is the situation of my country, but also many places in the world. These are very complex situations. And we should be on the alert for this stuff, because we think that the problems can be worsened when they are impacted in these ways. The effects on women are horrible. There are places where the state can't even go in and control things. We are facing situations like that. And in light of those realities, we have an immense and an urgent struggle ahead. We need all of the lucidity, all of the generosity, all of the capacities to be able to connect. That's what we need today, no less than that.
Bueno, yo lo que quería era hacer un llamado.
What I wanted to do was make a call on all governments not to fall into green capitalism, where the corporations, the same ones that have done so much harm to us, are taking charge of renewable energy, supposedly with citizen participation, and grabbing land supposedly to grow crops that are so-called sustainable. But green energy is a myth in many instances. So I call on governments to have citizen participation, to let the territories decide what they're going to do in terms of energy. Thank you.
And
Well, if I may, in the case of Peru, we have to work toward ratification. Not ratification, but adhesion. And we have to push the countries that are not already parties to the Escazú Agreement. The 33 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean should adhere to the Escazú Agreement. We've got about 24 right now. We need it to be law in all these 33 countries. And if it's law in all these countries, it will be a standard for the entire region. It's important that each of us work on this in our own countries, because we can't just say to each person what their path should be. If you're here for the region. The idea of this has always been that it be a bottom-up effort. And that's why we've got so many problems with different governments and authorities, right? Because this is a tool for activists. And one thing that we must avoid, we know it and we've seen it in other spaces, the issue of greenwashing. We have to avoid pinkwashing too, which is when organizations or companies, especially in the North, say, oh yeah, we support female defenders in the South, when they don't give a single dollar to it. They just put that on their website or put a little picture there of a woman. No, we need support that is very tangible and not just propaganda. And we have to be very aware of that stuff, because we've seen greenwashing in many other spaces. We've got to avoid that. That's why it's so important for these gender issues not to just come from 2 or 3 friends or 2 or 3 institutions or one institution that wants to be the leader of this, but rather we need this to be a collective effort among all of us who are here. We're seeing that there's a need to work on this gender issue even more. And I think that's our task moving forward, right? Maria Jose, it hasn't been done yet. We're seeing the first steps. I think that we need to make progress bit by bit and always make sure that we're staying in touch with each other. That's what I would say. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to our online speakers in the Zoom. I see that Amelia has her hand up and wants to make a comment. Also, we got Beatriz wanting to speak, and Silvia and Patricia, you may also make another comment if you would like to. Thank you very much. Perhaps responding a bit to the questions. Well, I'll say that first, there was a colleague we have been collaborating with from Ecomache on environmental citizenship trainings. I'm putting a link here in the chat. We have, well, our perspective has always been based on intersectional feminism and recognizing that there isn't a single way to be a woman. We all have different identities, and some of us have had privileges, others have had more challenges. And so we have the participation of Afro-descendant women and communities in different parts of Latin America. And thank you for putting this point on the table, because I think that this is one of the big challenges that we have as social movements in Latin America, that sometimes we don't think of the other struggles that exist. And thank you for mentioning it. We're all open. If you have links with lots of other organizations and colleagues, well, please invite them. And that leads me to my second point about the uniqueness of the network. This is also part of Carmen's comment. We know some of us are here who have been participating for many years. We have more experience, and others with renewed energy. But this space is becoming broader and more transparent, more democratic. We want everyone to be here. And I'll also repeat that. As the Bolivian senator said, we need this movement to be, well, not just from a few women, but we need the involvement of other actors. We need dialogue, we need collaboration with other actors so that these suggestions, this transformation that we want can become a reality. And the last message I wanted to leave you with was about this program that I have shared in the chat about environmental citizenship trainings. We've got a second edition coming up. It's a specific training for women from all different contexts who want to learn about how to get the Escazú Agreement applied in their different cases. And thank you. Well, I'm glad to continue with the conversation. Thank you, Amelia. Beatriz? Yes, thank you, Mariana. I'd like to answer some of the questions as well that we were given from some of our colleagues. I remember the person who asked about whether this space could also be useful for connecting. And I wanted to share that we work in a group that's the Regional Gender and Extractives Group. We work with some different colleagues in Peru, Central America, and Mexico. And through that group, we are also trying to form a regional front that's a bit more focused on the issue of gender and the fight against extractive industries. And there are possibilities to participate. We also do we do webinars as well. We do newsletters, and we have put out our first one on the impact of COVID on women a couple of years ago, and it's a collective effort. We're in it together. I also think it's very important to note this issue of the green economy and how it's being appropriated. These are greenwashing practices that are mostly done by the corporations who want to make their products look more environmentally friendly. And they're using the concept of development and even gender now. We also see how in the industries, they are doing pink washing when they're a very harmful things and even criminalizing folks. And so we need to be careful about these sorts of appropriations and greenwashing and also pink or purple washing that the corporations are implementing already. And on the other hand, also Francisca, who was asking about how to work against the narratives and conservative groups. Well, this is a huge task. We don't want to die in the attempt because this is something that requires a lot of effort. I'll just answer really fast. In Mexico, we're trying to change the mining law to be able to restrict the privileges that are given to the mining industry. And it's taking a lot to change these narratives. They say that it's going to affect jobs, affect national development, affect investment. And you know all these things because you see it in your countries as well. And I think that what I could say is, as a collective effort, we must sort of take turns or have like a group with different capacities, with folks who can do communication work, folks who can do lobbying, folks who can do research. That's really important to be able to work against the myths that industries are putting forth when they say that they don't contaminate, that they use recycled water, that there's going to be no impacts on biodiversity, that they don't harm human health. Well, we've got to do research on this stuff and we've got to work in a multidisciplinary way. That's what I would say. And well, I will share with you the information about our group if you want to write to us on Facebook. And we would be very glad to speak with you. Thank you for the invitation and greetings to everyone. So we're going to close with some comments from Silvia and Patricia, please. Silvia?
Bueno,
Hello?
es un espacio
Well, this is a very enriching space that we've got right now, sharing with all of you from the indigenous territories. We appreciate your support. You are our voice in the world so that folks can know what we're living through and what we're working, what our struggle is. And talking about the issue of contamination of our rivers with mercury, we women, we're always organized. We are practicing fish breeding in enclosures now, enclosed spaces, because this is one of the bases of our diet. We want to conserve our forests and ensure our food sovereignty as women. We need to guarantee our families access to food and access for our whole territory. So I wanted to thank you for bringing our voice to other arenas, and thank you for the protection from the Escazú Agreement. We want to continue participating in these spaces of power and to make sure that our voices are heard by everyone, really. Thank you very much. Well, this is an important space where grassroots women can be heard and they can share the struggles that they're facing in their territories. As Amazonian women, we are frontline women defenders of the forest and the environment. And this has consequences that we've been experiencing over all these years, consequences that we are facing in our daily lives. But we are women who are women of resistance and resiliency. And that's why we are going to continue in our processes of resistance, raising our voices always and ensuring that there's justice for women and inclusion for women, and that women can express themselves with their own voices, that they can be their own spokespeople, and they can identify all of those things that are doing them so much harm and doing so much harm to our territories, the Indigenous people's territories. And the things that are within our territories are the things that we are advancing in our day-to-day. Thank you very much. Thanks for allowing me to speak in this space. Thank you very much, Patricia. Thank you, Silvia. Thanks to all of our speakers present here in the room. And to those on the Zoom, thank you, Osprey. Thank you, Catherine, for opening this space and for providing the live broadcast. I wanted to thank everyone who is in the room for attending, for your questions, for your interest, and we're going to continue working on this important issue of the Escazú Agreement. And this issue that's so important for women and defenders in our territories. Thank you. I really appreciate your participation, and we're going to share the recording, and you can share this with other folks as well. Thanks once again, and we will close with that.
Thank you. Gracias. Bye.
Gracias, que estén muy bien.
Adiós, chao.
Thank you. Take care.